Hey, welcome to episode 2 of Tim Talks, and I'm with Heidi. We're going to take every week and we're going to hang out with some of our small group leaders. So Heidi, talk to me about your experience in youth ministry. What's your story to be in youth ministry? That's what we're talking about today, stories. So,
well, really, I fell in love with youth ministry when I was a youth because I had a difficult kind of family situation, and it was a youth leader that introduced me to Jesus. And through that introduction to Jesus, my whole life kind of shifted, and I just wanted to be available to kids that had the same needs. So, been doing it for a while since. Well, I did it right out of college, and then started up again when my kids got to that age.
Very cool, very cool. And what small group do you lead?
I lead the best small group in the group, which is the Senior Girls. Go! I love you.
I hear them. Even though this is shooting at a different time, I totally hear the girls. Thanks for being loud. You are awesome. Well, we got your questions, and we even got your Twitter questions that we put in here. So let's go ahead and go. What if we are all part of the same story? Why is there so much hate between people? That's actually a really good question. So if we're all part of the same story, why is there so much hate between people? So do you want to take that, Heidi, the expert?
Sure, I think so. I don't know that I'm an expert, but I think there's hate because, sin entered the world. And when sin entered the world, the story became darkened, and people started making poor choices with their lives and hurting other people, and hatred is a part of that.
Yeah.
And so, but thankfully Jesus can rewrite the story in each of us, and so that's something hopeful to look forward to.
Yeah, that's good. That's a really great answer. Better does not include the word story, so we're not answering it because we specifically said to use the word story. Okay. How do I help people in their story? That was asked by Twitter. I go by Charles asked that. How do I help people in their story? And that was kind of a little bit about last week, what we talked about as far as Renee's story. And I think, Jesus said he did not come to earth to be served. He came down here to earth to serve, and that's how we help people, by just serving them, asking how we can help. I think that icebreaker right there is a huge way to help people in their story.
I agree. That's a great answer.
Thank you. Appreciate that. What stories from the Bible relate to teenagers? That's an easy one to read.
Wow, yeah.
All of them.
They did.
All of them relate to teenagers. We forget a lot of times that a lot of people in the Bible were teenagers. Mary, the mother of Jesus, was a teenager when she actually was pregnant and gave birth to Jesus. David slayed the giant Goliath when he was a teenager. Josiah was actually younger than a teenager when he became a king. He became a king at 8 years old. And even that they might not be teenagers, Abraham was 80 years old when his story really got started. They all relate to us because we're people. And we all have the same tendencies as people, weaknesses as people. So even though a story doesn't necessarily may use our age, even though a lot of them do. Matter of fact, most of the disciples, theologians believe, were teenagers. Everyone but Peter, a lot of the theologians and scholars believe all of them were disciples because they didn't have to pay a temple tax, and that was, or they were all teenagers because they didn't have to pay a temple tax. So,
And I really like that. You probably can quote the exact verse, but that scripture in Timothy that talks about don't look down on anyone for their youth, because when Paul is talking to Timothy and encouraging him in his youth to serve God. So
absolutely. So even though they may not, say their age or say that they're a sophomore in high school because they didn't have that back then, these stories do still relate to us. So last one. I'm writing stories, but I like writing stories with magic. So would that be okay to write good things about dark magic in a book with people breaking sin or being part of sin? Or looks like a
breaking sin.
Breaking sin.
Yeah. Well, I think that, in the scripture it talks about that we should dwell on things that are noble and good. I think there are stories that, like the Tolkien stories or some of the stories that have those experiences, but they always point back to a good character ending. And I think sometimes you have to just really examine that individual book itself and say, what is this teaching? Is especially in the dark magic, especially because God clearly talks about that's not a good thing. So, but what is your story going to teach? Is it going to teach the things that Jesus wants you to know and the character qualities that he wants you to know? Or is it going to turn people in a path that would be towards darkness? And so that's how I would evaluate it.
That's great. That's great. And I love to write too. And the thing about writing is that's an absolute gift. Not everyone can write. You know, Heidi is actually an English major and she's brilliant with words, and that's why we're having her share about stories. But, you know, whenever God gives you a gift, use it for good. You know, whatever that gift is, if that's writing, if that's playing ball, if that's singing, use those gifts for good. So if you're out there, that's what I'd encourage you with. But that's all the questions we have for Tim Talks. Look at our amazing box that we have.
Isn't it gorgeous?
Isn't it incredible? So we're just admiring the craftsmanship. So any more shout outs to...
Go live a good story with your life.
Awesome. Thanks, and we'll see you next week. By the way, I almost forgot what we're talking about next week, so you can send your questions in. Next week, it's all about baptism. So any question that you have on baptism, send them in, and we'll talk about on Tim Talks next week. Sorry about that. Get your questions in, and we'll see you next week.